Okay, so if the Mac version is the beach ball of death. This is the Windows version, so it's just turning right now. But I'm going to go ahead and go on and let it do its thing. So what we have here, technology on the board lives in two different places. One is on the surface of the screen, and the other is on the pen tray itself. The surface of the screen, the way that this works is you have two pieces of plastic separated by an air gap. So when you touch on the front piece of plastic, it touches the rear piece of plastic, and that's how you touch. Now, because of this technology, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind when you're writing on the surface of the screen. And some of you saw this when you were writing, and once this thing stops spinning, I will go ahead and go on to the next slide, but let's try it. Okay, there it is again. I'm just going to reopen it right back up. All right, there are a few things you have to keep in mind. First thing is you have to touch with intent. Now imagine telling your students to touch with intent. What does this mean? Right? Think of this as the surface of the screen is similar to the keypad on a microwave. If you brush lightly across the surface of the screen, it will not respond. If you touch with intent, it will respond. It translates to write hard. You also have to apply constant pressure. Some of you saw this while you were writing a little earlier. This is what constant pressure looks like. This is what happens if you don't have constant pressure. Again, write hard. Also, it's a very durable surface. We've had stories where students have punctured the board, they've stapled it, they've poked holes in it with scissors, and the board still works. What will happen is sometimes if somebody puts a hole in one, you try to write anywhere near it, and they'll slightly pull it in, and then keep going. But it's a very durable surface. It's meant to take the abuse that's meted out by these kids. One last thing is 1 point of contact at a time.
Don?
Yes?
Do we need to worry about cleaning it at all?
We'll get to it.
Okay.
Okay, so here's what it means when you have 1 point of contact. Here's what happens if you have 2 points of contact. Okay, so it splits the difference between the two. Why is this important? Well, some of us like to write small. Okay, what we're usually doing is we're dragging our pinky or we're dragging our wrist on the surface of the screen. Here's what happens when you write your notes. With 1 point of contact, here's what happens if I drag my pinky. Here's what happens if I drag my wrist. You have no idea what that thing's going to do. Okay, so remember, let the pen tip do the writing, and your notes will come out correctly. And sometimes it's a little hard when you're first using a smartboard is, when do I use a pen and when do I use my finger? Because what will happen is, if I picked up a pen and I try to click on something, it's going to make those marks because it thinks that you want to write. So here's a quick rule of thumb. If you're going to write, go ahead and pick up a pen. If you're going to click on something, put the pen down, and then you can use your finger. Every single touch that you do on this board is equivalent to a mouse click. Out of curiosity, how many of you are going to be using a Mac with this? Is everybody using their nice new ThinkPads here with Windows 8 that you have to figure out how to use? Okay. All right. So what this does, it's good. There are a few key differences between a Mac and a PC, but since you guys are all using PCs, we have to access. It allows us to access an interactive files and applications. So every single touch is equivalent to a left mouse click. Had a question about cleaning. All right. You can use Windex, you can use the dry erase marker sprays on this. However, don't spray the surface of the screen directly. What I would do is spray a piece of cloth or a towel and wipe the surface of the screen with it. The reason you don't want to spray the screen directly is because on the bottom of the board, as well as the pen tray, there are electronics that can get fried if you get liquid on it. Questions about dirty fingers that kids have and passing on germs, you can use those disinfectant wipes just as long as the wipes that you use is not abrasive on the surface of the screen. Okay, so feel free to disinfect that. Yes?
I had a question about clicking. You said a touch is like a left click.
Yep.
How do you right, is there using a right click or how do you right click?
Yeah, so we'll get to right click. Feel free to raise your hand. This is very informal. All right. Oh, yes.
What happens if I have never seen this, but I could only imagine it does happen. What happens if a child writes accidentally with like a permanent marker?
Okay. Very good question. So the question was, for those of you who didn't hear it, is what happens if a child writes on it with a permanent marker? Okay, I'm going to step back first. Kids tend to really like this and respect it. So they don't want anything to happen to the board. But just in case that happens, I've seen that, or a substitute teacher comes in and writes on this with a dry erase marker, okay? What you can do is you can use a high-order dry erase marker. I don't know if you remember those things. Or you can go to one of the Office Depot, Office Max Staples places that have markers that can actually remove permanent marker marks on the surface of the screen. If you don't have any of those, a light alcohol-based solution will work to get this out. What you do is, if that ever happens, you take that high-order dry erase marker. By the way, those are, to a lot of young ones here, those are the ones that kids used to get high off of. So you know anything about that. But what you do is you go over the surface of the screen, or where that marker is, let it sit for just a few seconds, then wipe it off. Go over it, wipe it off, and then keep doing that. Again, an alcohol-based solution will work as well. What will happen usually is you'll get